Hey, what's up everybody, and welcome back. This is Infamous coming back with another video. This is not a build video, this is actually a how-to build for ESO Battlegrounds. So for those who are interested in how to theory craft and what tools that are useful and how to effectively understand what sort of, I guess, markers am I looking to shoot for, and this is typically what I look for and whenever I create a build, whether it's a tankier build or a support build, or if I'm looking for like a very strong DPS build. This build in particular is my light armor Templar build. Not really here to discuss this build in particular, but it is something to show. As for me, whenever I'm theory crafting, especially for a DPS sort of character, typically whatever your max resource is, whether you're building for a stamina class or if you're building for a magicka class, you typically want to shoot for, I would say, at least try to hit the 30k mark for no CP BGs. And like I always say in all of my streams, for a minimum health, you really want to shoot for, I would say, a minimum of 20k. 20k HP, I think, in my opinion, is the minimum that you really want to shoot for. I see a lot of people that typically play lower than that, and usually they get blown up, because if you get hit by a dot followed by a CC, you're really subject to getting taken down by a burst ultimate like a Dawnbreaker, something, or maybe like if you get hit by a frag into an ult. Typically if you're like around 18, I've seen people 17k HP, and you're really just making yourself a target. So typically that's what I look for when I'm PvPing. I'm paying attention to other people's HP bars and seeing who has relatively lower health than the others, and of course who's looking a little squishier than others. And those are particularly the people that I'm going to focus. And I think most people who understand ESO Battlegrounds, especially if you're playing in something like Deathmatch, Team Deathmatch, you're only making yourself a target. Now in 4v4v4s, you have to keep in mind that you literally could be subject to being hit by 8 players. And so you really want to have a comfortable amount of HP that you can recover, where you can take burst and get CC'd and have just enough HP that you have enough time to recover and either pop a heal, find some line of sight, maybe throw on a damage shield, or use an escape mechanism like streak or cloak to be able to get away. If your HP is too low, and if your raw mitigation between your physical and spell resistance is also too low, you're going to end up eating too much damage, especially if that damage is critical damage that's coming your way. So that's why particularly you want to shoot for as much mitigation as you can harness in your build, while at the same time maintaining high spell damage, high max magicka, or high stamina, high weapon damage. This particular build, as you can see from my Templar, this is a magicka build. I'm not wearing heavy, this is a light armor build. But as you can see, I'm hitting my markers. I'm hitting above 20k, I'm almost 23k. I've hit the 31k, so I'm well into the amount of max magic that I particularly feel for most builds. Your max source should be around 30k or close to it, or if you can get it above it while still maintaining above 20k health, great. Of course, when it comes to stamina, I always feel really comfortable being north of, I would say, 14k no CP. With the amount of builds that you can theory craft, there's really no reason to run, you know, that far down, because typically I like to run situational pieces of sturdy for situational block. So even if I'm running dual wield, or if I'm running a shield, you know, having that 8% reduction to block, and block is important if you're gonna eat a big burst, maybe from a frag or from a spectral bow proc. It's good to be able to block to mitigate that damage. Blocking mitigates damage by a base of 50%, not including any passives either from your class or from, like, if you're running sword and shield, or if you're running an ice staff, things of that nature, or if you're running like defensive posture or etc., anything like that. Typically for a magicka build doesn't really stack max weapon damage, max spell damage as good as physical stamina ability. Stem characters can stack weapon damage. But with that said, for a DPS build or even a healer, I would say you want to be north of 3k fully buffed. So if that's with a weapon proc plus your major sorcery, this build has both major and minor sorcery because Templar gains minor sorcery because of their passive, and of course it also gives it to their team. But in this particular build, as you can see, I'm almost 4100 spell damage in no CP with 30% crit because I am running a light armor, and then of course I am at 70% critical. Templar gets an extra 10% because of their passive, and then of course I am running channeled focus for the extra mobility as well as for the minor force. So I've got a lot of critical damage. This is a very strong DPS build that I designed way back in Murkmire. It still works just as good today. The reason being is because for Magicka builds, you typically want to go the route of light armor if you're looking to maintain high damage and high burst. But of course, the difficulty with light armor is that it sometimes, depending upon how you build, it doesn't have the mitigation that you're looking for. But as you can see, this particular build is kind of fairly tanky. It's got 29k and almost 25k physical, and then we're running 20% into critical reduction. And I feel that's a good amount, maybe a little higher than normal. I could run like an extra divines and boost up and get north of 4100 spell damage, but I feel comfortable with the way the build is. As you can see, typically depending upon how you build, you may not need high resources recovery, either because you're wearing heavy armor, maybe you're a DK running dual wield and you can heavy attack to regen a lot of your stamina, or you can use a resto staff on your back bar to heavy attack from range and gain a big chunk of your Magicka back. Of course, on Magicka builds, you really want to have a way to maintain your stamina, and that's why on a lot of builds, and on this build in particular, I utilize dual wield both for the extra spell damage as well as running 2 different glyphs, but even more importantly, it's for the ability after I CC break and I jump into the fight, I will typically lead with a heavy attack, and the heavy attack will help to restore my stamina. As you can see, this is my recovery with a pot. 600 stamina recovery really isn't a lot, and I think on this particular build I actually did go, instead of full spell damage, I think I did go with a recovery to my stamina because I was north of 700. So I think this is what this particular build looks like, with 800 definitely a lot better, and then of course you throw in a heavy attack, and the heavy attack is going to give you just over, I think, 2400 for the heavy attack, and then of course, you know, between that and my stamina recovery, I feel comfortable being able to situationally block and of course CC break, roll dodge, etc. And so this is just my opinion. I've done probably over 2,000 battlegrounds at this point since the inception of battlegrounds. I really stopped doing open world, and I particularly focused on no CP BGs because it was no lag, and then of course it was more evenly matched, so to speak. And I feel that no CP offers a much more competitive scene than CP, where a lot of builds get carried due to CP. I feel no CP is definitely ESO's way of salvaging the PvP in this game, as well as being able to offer the player a more balanced PvP. Of course, there are a few things that need to be tweaked, like the removal of proc sets, just to say the least. But this is basically my how-to for building. Like I said, you want to typically shoot north of 20k HP. You want to try to hit that 30k marker, and whether you're building for stamina or Magicka. And then of course, depending upon what you're building for, depending upon your class, you may not necessarily need to have really high regen. For this build, I only run 700 because I have heavy attacks, I have channeled focus, and then I'm running, on this build, I'm running Desert Rose as well as Magicka Furnace. So it's giving me a lot of recovery that isn't showing up on my sheet. For example, if you're a stamina build, you might, and you're running heavy armor, you could run something like what is it, that trapping set that basically is like the reverse of Magicka Furnace, and instead it gives you a flood of max stam. You could run things like like Black Rose, you could be running a dual wield, and you have basically heavy attacks are your spammable. If you're a DK, you have ultimates. Of course, you always have, you know, a pot. So in ESO, there's numerous ways to create regen without actually having to stack it into your kit here. As you can see on this build, doesn't have a lot of regen. This is really focused on putting out a lot of damage, but in the fight, it has a lot of regen. So you can build for regen, or you can build for regen that takes place only when you're in combat, such as Black Rose. Black Rose doesn't do anything for you out of combat, but the moment you're in combat, it offers you all the regen that you will need, just like Magica Furnace, just like Desert Rose. It doesn't do anything for you outside of the fight, but once you're in the fight, it gives you a lot of the sustain that you might need, and that allows you to build a kit excuse me, that allows you to build a kit that is a little higher in terms of maximum resources and maximum either weapon or spell damage, while at the same time you're basically foregoing natural regen for in combat regen. And so this is basically my take. Typically, if you're making a DPS build, you want to try to hit the 7k marker. I would say between maybe 6,800, and of course the higher the better. But of course you want to be able to maintain, you know, your resources, your HP, and have enough recovery either through raw regen or through the rest of your abilities, either heavy attacking, etc. Like I said, this is just my interpretation of basically created this build video, or this video, to help out new players who are looking for a little bit more content on how to create builds, or how to understand how builds work in the Elder Scrolls Online for people who are looking to do PvP battlegrounds. This is my take. This is Infamous, and I'm out. I'll be back with some more how-to videos for the Elder Scrolls Online battlegrounds. Thanks for watching. Feel free to like, comment, and subscribe.